Second service, how we doing? Oh my goodness, it is always amazing to be with you. And I will say, you've chosen an absolutely amazing Sunday to show up to. And it's not because of the music and it's not because of the coffee, but it's because this morning we're stepping into something brand new as a church family. We are about to take an incredibly bold step of faith, one that in our 77-year history as a church, we have never taken before. And if I'm honest, it's never even been on our radar. If you had asked me a few months ago about this, I would have told you, no, not for us. But then I got a phone call in December, and that call turned into a conversation, and that conversation began to stir something, and not just in me, but in our entire leadership team. And it started to feel like maybe, just maybe, Jesus was nudging us, that Jesus was inviting us into a space that felt unfamiliar, a space that felt like that's not really our thing. But the more we prayed and the more we listened, the more we sensed, the more we felt that it may not be the space we thought we belonged in, but it's exactly the space Jesus is inviting us into. And Neighborhood Church, I cannot wait to share with you what that means, but you have to wait to the end of the sermon. Because before we jump into what's ahead, I do want to take us on a quick journey back. I want to rewind the clock for just a moment. I want to take us actually all the way back to the very beginning of the Jesus movement. Because you may not know this, but right out of the gate, the early church, the very first generation of Christians, they were wrestling with some very big questions, some very tough decisions that were in front of them, and they were just trying to figure out what it meant to follow Jesus in brand new territory. And what they faced back then, I believe, has something very powerful to say to us today. So I want us to take a moment and step back, because what we're stepping into as a church has incredibly deep roots. What I'd like to do is show you a controversy. Now, here at Neighborhood, we are not embroiled in controversy, but the challenge I want to show you that the early church faced has implications for the kind of church that we want to be. And the debate I'm going to show you will feel, I think for most of you, fairly familiar because it hasn't really gone away in 2,000 years of church history. In fact, the tension, the issue, the controversy that these early Christians dealt with might be the very reason some of you left church. Might be the very reason some of you haven't been to church in a really, really long time and you're now just starting to dabble again. This controversy, this tension, this issue, this challenge I want to show you, it might be the reason your parents took you out of church when you were a kid and said, we're done, we're never going back. And this whole thing, this whole moment actually takes place pretty much right after Jesus does his whole die and rise from the dead thing. About 20 years after the first Easter, the church kind of runs into this huge problem. I mean, they just have to deal with it. There's questions and there's controversy and tension and debate and it's all going on. And it's right out of the gate. These are like, everyone's a brand new Christian at this point, right? And it all revolved around this debate, this controversy. It all revolved around one question. And the question was, who's in? Who's in? Who gets to be a part of this Jesus thing? I mean, how good do you have to be a part of the Jesus thing? I mean, how cleaned up does your life need to look before you're allowed in the room? Now, here's what you need to know. When the Jesus movement first got started, there were two groups of people sort of saying, I want it. And the first group, we'll call them the Jewish believers. Now, these were, as it sounds, they'd been raised in the deep tradition of Judaism, thousands of years of religious law and ritual and cultural identity, right? I mean, it's all of that. And when these guys started following Jesus, they just assumed that Christianity or this whole Messiah thing was just sort of the next chapter in their story, the Jewish story. And they just assumed if you want to follow Jesus, you got to follow Moses first. The whole 10 Commandments and all the Jewish religious law and all of that. So that was the first group sort of jumping in on this Christian thing. But the other group, we'll just call that group everyone else, the outsiders, the ones that the Jewish community called Gentiles. And these Gentiles, they were hearing something completely different. Their big voice in their life was a pretty passionate church planter. His name was Paul, and Paul had some buddies that were helping him. But Paul and his buddies, they were running around telling these Gentiles, these non-Jewish, kind of everyone else crowd, hey, with Jesus, you're being handed a free gift, a gift of grace and love and forgiveness, a fresh start, a new way to live, right? Now, this created a tension. There was a tension, a controversy, a debate between these two groups. Because on the one hand, with Jewish believers, they were all about, religious law, ritual, cultural identity, tradition, all of that stuff. But then you had the everyone else group. And Paul and his friends were running around saying, hey, it's all about grace and it's all about invitation and we're not doing the rule thing anymore. And that created a very real problem for the early church. It was a tension that wasn't going to get solved. And we know that because it's still a tension today. But it is a tension that could be managed, could be better understood. Right? Again, some of you know this tension well. Some of you have left church because of it, because you showed up at a church and you got the sense that unless you dressed a certain way, that unless you talked a certain way, that unless you cleaned up your life in just the right way, you really weren't welcome, even if they were saying you were welcome. But then others of you are on the other side of this tension, and you're church people, right? I mean, you are like, I've been doing church my whole life, and sure, you're like, yeah, I get grace. Yeah, we got to do grace. That's great. But Jesus did bring us this whole new way to live, this radical new ethic of love. I mean, it does ask us some things for our life. The ethic does ask us to organize our lives differently. And some of you have been in church a long time. You're looking at the people sitting next to you right now, and you're wondering, even this moment, when are these people going to start reorganizing, right? When are these people going to get on track because they look kind of shady, right? They look a little shifty, and I don't know that I want to be in the same church as these people. So just like the very beginning of this whole Jesus movement, we're still trying to figure out what do we do with this tension, a tension that exists between what we'll call grace and truth. Grace and truth. How do we hold on to grace without throwing out truth? And how do we communicate truth and not cage in grace? But let's be honest, if you're a church people get weird about this tension, and we really don't like holding space for this tension, so we try to clean it up. And we really do say things like, everyone's welcome, and then we hand them the list of have-tos before we really accept them in our community. And I will just tell you, I've been a pastor my entire adult life, almost 30 years I've been a pastor. And I will speak for all pastors when I say, this is the biggest headache of my life, this tension right here. And you all thinking, I care about your opinion regarding this tension. Right? I mean, listen, I'll be honest with you. Listen, the number one reason, people will leave neighborhood church for two reasons. They're moving away from the area, or they're dead, right? That's why people leave. People die. People gasped right now. People die, okay? And some people who go here die, and they don't come here anymore, right? And so, but there is a third reason people will leave our church, and it's that they are uncomfortable holding space for this tension. They just are. And they want me to do one of two things. Either they're on the church people side of this, and they want me to tidy up the place, Or they're on the grace side of this thing, and they want me to never say anything and just let people sort of live their truth. And again, what's challenging and the headache part of this is everybody has their own definition of what they think it means to tidy up the place, or what they think it means to just let everybody live their truth. And I can tell you after 30 years, typically their definition of tidy up the place or live your truth, typically unrealistic, wrong, and pretty self-serving for the most part, and rooted in their own fears and things like that. So it can be exhausting if you're in my shoes. Because I will tell you this, we actually don't have to deal with it. Jesus already did. In fact, John, Jesus' very best friend, when he was trying to describe Jesus to us, he speaks into this issue directly. It's how he describes Jesus. Here's what John says, Jesus' best friend. He says, listen, the word, that's what John calls Jesus, the word as in the literal spoken word of God, became flesh. So he became a person and made his dwelling among us. And so he's living with us, right? We know that part of the story. And we've seen his glory. Like, I'm an eyewitness. Me and my friends, we are eyewitnesses to this fact. The glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of what? Grace and truth. I hope you catch this. Not a balance of grace and truth, not 50-50, not a careful mix. John says, I saw it, I watched it, I was present for it, I am an eyewitness, and he, Jesus, was full of grace and full of truth all at once, no tension, no contradiction, Jesus just living both completely. Now, when the church gets this right, and I hope that we do, but I will be the first to tell you, we won't always get it right. It is a tension for us mere mortals. But it's not a balancing act. It's not a, well, we were a little truthy there, so we want to be a little gracy here. It's not like that. It's not clean yourself up first, and it's not throw out every true thing so everybody feels comfortable. It's grace and it's truth. And that's exactly what the early church was wrestling with. And in many ways, it's what the 2,000-year-old church is still wrestling with. And luckily for us, there was a brilliant man and an ancient historian. His name was Luke. And he actually, records for us how this wrestling that the early church was doing with this controversy, how it all went down. And here's what Luke records. He says this. He says, so certain people came down from Judea. So Judea, just think Israel. So the country of Israel, there were some people from Israel, some Jesus people from Israel who went to Antioch. Now, Antioch is a city that would today be in modern day Turkey. So some Christians went from Israel up to Turkey, and they had a message for the Christians that were living in Turkey. And their message was, unless you're circumcised, according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. So we know the people from Israel, they're those Jewish believers. That's that category. And they went up to the everybody else category, and they were communicating to them, listen, you're not really saved unless you become Jewish. That was their welcome speech. Hey, Gentiles. Hey, non-Jewish, everyone else people. Unless you have surgery, you can't be a Christian. That's the worst welcome message ever. Right? Who's gonna do that? Nobody's gonna do that. Now, Paul, who I mentioned earlier, who was running around planting all of these churches, and he had that message of, no, it's about grace, free gift, love, forgiveness, all of that. He is furious that these people from Israel are up in Turkey with this message of you have to be circumcised and become Jewish. I mean, he loses it. He's very grumpy over this. In fact, Luke very, I think kindly, democratically sort of talks about this. Here's how Luke talks about it. This brought Paul and Barnabas, one of Paul's friends, into sharp dispute and debate with them. It was much more than a sharp dispute. They were furious. And so what are they going to do? There's clearly a tension. We've got Jewish believers, we've got the everyone else believers. What are we supposed to do with this? And so what they do is they gather all the leaders, they go down to Jerusalem, and they're going to have it out. They're going to have it out. And so they do. And everybody's sort of, well, I think this, and I think this, and here's my proof text, here's my verse from the Bible that, makes it clear I'm right. And then the other group will know, here's my verse from the Bible that makes it clear I'm right. And you can play that game till Jesus comes back, right? But after the debate and after everybody was, here it is, and here's what I think, and all of that, James, who at this point is sort of de facto leader of the Christian church, he happens to be Jesus' half-brother, so he has some credibility. He stands up in that crowd, and he says this: "It's my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the everyone else crowd, the Gentiles, who are turning to God." Now let that sink in for a minute. This is someone who grew up with Jesus. He knew the ethic of Jesus. He knew the teaching of Jesus. And yet he looks at this messy, growing, confusing Jesus movement, and he says, you know what? Let's just not make it harder than it needs to be. People are messy. Let's just let that be. And turning to God isn't always instant. It can be a really long time. It's a process, and it can be a long process. But James stands up in the middle of that debate, and he says, we're not going to be in the business of building walls. We will be in the business of building bridges, and we're not going to make it difficult for people who are turning to Jesus. And then he continues, and he says this: so why don't you all write our Christian friends up in Antioch, in Turkey, and write them this. You don't have to be Jewish. No circumcision necessary. We're not going to do any of that. Instead, write them, telling them to abstain from food polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, from the meat of strangled animals, and from blood. Now, James opens the conversation, stands up, we're building bridges, not walls. Grace, listen, we're not making it, we are clearing the path for people. Grace. And then he says, however, this new ethic of love does invite us to a life reorganization, and he says, here's how we're gonna do it. I'm gonna cut through centuries of religious systems. I'm gonna cut through centuries of religious tradition. And there's just two things, guys, that might be helpful here. Try not to offend your Jewish brothers and sisters with the whole food stuff. That's what that's about. He's addressing Jewish food laws. And don't sleep around. Okay, James, well, what about all the other sins, especially the ones that make me mad? What about cheating and lying and stealing and, just go with the list. Yeah, no, we don't, not yet. That's not where we're at in this conversation, not yet. Not because they don't matter, but because relationship comes first. Grace comes first. We build bridges, not walls. Here's my paraphrase of James, what James says. Hey, out of respect, let's avoid this food stuff because it really offends your Jewish Christian friends. And for your own good, stop doing things that hurt people and yourself. That's it. That's it. That's the message. That's how the early church didn't split. They said it isn't about choosing grace or truth. It's about living both the best way we can, the way Jesus did. And friends, this is huge because this tension is still very real in our generation, and the generation before, and the generation before that, all the way back to these guys. And I know what it looks like when we get it wrong. The church knows what it looks like when we get this wrong. When we lead with rules instead of relationship, when we prioritize image over transformation from the inside out, when we choose comfort over calling, we will lose people. In fact, we have lost entire generations. But when we get it right, when the local church becomes a place where grace and truth walk hand in hand, where people can come as they are, meet Jesus, and begin a process of transformation, everything changes. And that's the kind of church that we want to be. a church that does our very best to walk fully in grace and truth. Right? That everybody's welcome here. Everybody. Every single person is welcome. We want to be a church, we say it like this, an outward-facing church that unchurched people love to attend. We want to be a church that does not make it difficult for people who are turning towards Jesus. We want to be a church where everybody feels so welcome, the rumor on the street goes something like this about us. You know, so-and-so goes to neighborhood church and they're blah, 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 right? I know that rumor's out there because some of you are shady, right? I mean, some of you, right? And people are saying, that person goes to neighborhood church. I'll bring that all day long. Absolutely they do. Absolutely they do. They are welcome here all day long, right? We want to be that kind of church. And a church that says, and can I introduce you to a man named Jesus who's going to invite you to a way of life that's going to so radically change you and your perspective, you don't even really know it's coming. But it also means we want to be a church that's committed to being in and for our community, right? We want to make a difference. We want to add value to the place that we call home. My very good friend, his name was Steve. He was the lead pastor before I stepped into the role. And he used to have this image, and he would say, listen, I want us to operate in such a way as a church that when they write the history book about the city of Visalia, they're going to be forced to give neighborhood church a chapter. And over the years, we've developed a name for our chapter. If we have any say in it, our chapter is going to be called For Visalia. And whether or not people ever believe what it is we believe, we want them to know that we believe in them, that we believe in their businesses, we believe in their marriages, we believe in their kids, we believe in their potential. We are for you. And we want to operate as a church in such a way that if we decided tomorrow, you know what, we're done. It's been a great run, 77 years, come on, that's awesome. But you know what, it's time to move on. Let's shut the doors, let's sell the property, let's kind of cash out, give all that money away, and let's just go on to the next thing. We want to operate in such a way that if we chose to do that, our city would freak out. They'd be calling us, knocking on our door, principals, business leaders, government leaders, everybody knocking on our door going, no, whoa. You can't close down. You can't close down, because if you close down, our community will suffer. Please stay open. That's the kind of church we want to be. And I believe it's the kind of church we already are. It's really sad. The stats out there on church closures is pretty radical. 2, maybe 3 to 1 in terms of churches closing to churches starting. Rapid decline, right, in church attendance. Every single day in America, a church shuts its doors for the last time. Every single day. And other than the handful of people that were left in that church, nobody knows or cares. And they just keep driving by that church. That cannot be our story. I want this community, whether they attend here or not, to go, you know what? Neighborhood church, yeah, some of those people go there. But there's something different about them. There's something wonderful about them. And you know what? I believe it. They're for me. This is the invitation. This is what I would even say Jesus has called us to do. And we've been committed to this vision for some time now. And you have a pastor that's fallen in love with this vision of the local church. And the phone call I received in December had me just asking a question about us. And I wondered if every community ought to have at least one church like ours, like Neighborhood Church. An outward-facing, community-involved church that unchurched people love to attend. I wonder if not every community ought to have a church just like ours. Now, let me tell you about that phone call in December. A friend of mine was on the other end of the call. Fellow pastor, someone I've known a long time and I respect, and he leads a church just up the road in Kingsburg. It's a church called Hope Kingsburg. I think we have there it is. There's Hope Kingsburg. It's right across, if you know the geography of Kingsburg, it's right across from Rafer Johnson Middle School on Stroud. That may mean nothing to you, but that's where it is. And he reached out to me with a very heavy heart. And he started sharing about where their church was at and some of the struggles that they'd been walking through. And honestly, it wasn't good. They were in very real trouble as a church, so much so that barring a miracle, they were gonna be facing the very real possibility of shutting their doors. Maybe a year, 18 months, 2 years, but they were on their way. And as you can imagine, this hit me hard. I love the local church. I want every single local church to thrive. And so I was bummed out for him. We talked about it for a minute, but then he said something that sort of just stopped me in my tracks. He asked me if I thought neighborhood church might be the miracle that they'd been praying for. He asked me if neighborhood church had ever thought of having campuses in different locations. He wondered what it might look like for neighborhood church to take over their church and to launch a campus in Kingsburg. And I've got to be honest with you, that question just kind of sat there with me for a minute. At first I didn't have words because no, this wasn't something we've talked about, and no, this wasn't something we'd even dreamt about. It was not on our radar. If you asked me the week before if neighborhood church would ever do something like this, I probably would have told you that's not really who we are. But that conversation just lingered. Something began to stir. This quiet sense that maybe, just maybe, Jesus was inviting us into something that, yes, absolutely felt outside of our comfort zone, but at the same time, right at the center of Jesus' mission. And so we kept praying and we kept talking, and over time, the question became an invitation. What if this church, Hope Church in Kingsburg, didn't have to close? What if instead it became a brand new expression of neighborhood church? What if the light didn't go out but was reignited? And not because we're the heroes of the story, but because we just said yes to stepping into someone else's story. Could this be the beginning of something really cool, something really big? And so since that phone call in December, we've been in a season of what you would call discernment, just trying to figure out, is this what we should be doing? And behind the scenes, I've been busy. I've been regularly meeting with the pastor of that church, the leadership of Hope Kingsburg. But it actually hasn't just been leadership talking to leadership. I've actually spent hours sitting with the whole church community there, fielding questions, hearing their hearts, walking very slowly and very carefully with them through what all of this could mean. And actually, what you don't know, one of the coolest things, is that over the last several months, they've been taking field trips down here. They've been having spies in the room on Sunday, trying to get a feel for who we are and catch a glimpse of what they might expect if this were to happen. They wanted to catch our vibe, right? They just wanted to know what kind of church we were. And so watching them walk through the doors, it's just been really cool. And so today, here's where we're at. Today, we have all that stirring, all that praying, all those conversations have turned into us not just looking at an open door, but making the decision to walk through that open door. And this fall, Neighborhood Church is launching a brand new campus in Kingsburg, California. Pretty cool, yeah? The sign's not gonna look, that's terrible. It's not gonna look like that. I just asked our graphic guy to make a sign that said neighborhood, not hope. So, I'm sure there'll be some design conversations happening. Now, here's the thing. We are not planting a church. We are launching a campus. And you might ask, well, what's the difference between planting a church and launching a campus that's a part of Neighborhood Church? That's a great question because the difference actually matters a lot. When you plant a church, what you're doing is you're starting something completely new, brand new. You raise up a team and you go find a pastor and you give them some money and then eventually you sort of bless them and send them out. They become their own church with their own leadership, their own identity, their own direction. We're cheering them on, but they are fully independent. We are not planting a church. That's not what we're doing. When you launch a campus, like what we're doing in Kingsburg, it's totally different. It's one church, multiple locations, but same heart, same mission, same vision, same teaching, same leadership, same everything. We're not sending anyone away. We're extending what God is already doing right here, because I'm convinced every community deserves to have at least one church like ours that's outward facing, that's committed to adding value to their city, and a place where unchurched people love to attend, what I would just call a Jesus church. The Kingsburg campus will be neighborhood church, but in a different zip code. They will share our culture, they will share our values, they will share our DNA, they will be a part of us. We'll worship together, learn together, serve together, dream together, but we will just do all of that in more than one location. This is about not building our brand, but expanding our reach. It's about making people for more, making space, making room for more people to find Jesus. It's about extending the bridge we're building so that more people have access to a church that's committed to not making it difficult. That's what this is about. We will be one church, two locations. So we're saying yes to stepping into their story. Yes to keeping the light on. Yes to carrying the grace and truth of Jesus into a brand new neighborhood. This is something we've never done before. We're out on the limb for sure, but we believe it's something Jesus is inviting us into and inviting us to do, because since the beginning, 1948, Neighborhood Church has always been about who's not here yet. We've always been about who's not here yet. It's always about making room for people, for the people who are still turning toward Jesus. So we're not just planting a campus, but we're creating a Jesus outpost, if you will, where people who are far from God can take a step closer. Look, I've been to Kingsburg. It's lovely. Let them know, whoever's calling, be like, did you know Neighborhood Church is launching a campus? It's so cool, you're not even gonna believe it. I'm just gonna put you on speaker, hold on. But whoever that is, I'm sorry to call you out and make you feel terrible right now. That's not my intent. In fact, yesterday, so I wanted to get to know. Obviously I've been up there a lot over the last few months, and yesterday I went to the Swedish festival in Kingsburg. Anyone go to the Swedish festival in Kingsburg yesterday? Yeah, it's totally amazing. I had, Swedish street food, and I even came across what we call Viking Jesus. This guy was carving Viking Jesus while we were there. It was amazing. The city commissioned him to make this Jesus, and I was like, could I borrow it for tomorrow? It would be so awesome to put him on stage with me, so we all get the feel, right, for that. But here's, I've been to Kingsburg, I've been exploring Kingsburg. Little known fact about me, actually, the first church I ever worked at nearly 30 years ago was in Kingsburg. I was a youth pastor in Kingsburg for a couple of years, and it was a great couple of years, and I used to live in Kingsburg. Kingsburg is fantastic. But here's what I know about Kingsburg. They don't need another church. They got a lot of churches. In fact, I don't know if you know the story of Kingsburg, but basically the Lutheran church way back in the day, the Swedish Lutheran church way back in the day said to this guy, hey, why don't you go find us a place in California we can all move to? And he picked Kingsburg. He just picked that dirt. And they built a Lutheran church. It's the big old church right across from the high school, if you're familiar with Kingsburg. And so at one point, you may not know this either, about 95% of the city of Kingsburg was Swedish. And they were all Swedes. Why of all the places in California you would choose that, I would have chosen the coast. Like, not the valley, but, they chose that because of its potential for agriculture and things like that. But they don't need another church. There's churches everywhere. This city got started with a Lutheran church, Swedish Lutheran church. But as I dug into the churches that are there, it did dawn on me, Kingsburg does need a church like ours. It does. Within 15, 20-minute drive, there's almost 100,000 people, 50,000 of which are totally unchurched. They're not going anywhere. We're not going to be able to avoid transfer growth. People are like, oh, there's a new cool whatever in town, That's fine. And they'll leave a church and they'll come to our church, and that's fine. We're not going to try to stop that. But that's not our goal, just to get other church people to leave their church for a cooler church. That's easy. That's not our goal. Our goal are those 50,000 people within a 15, 20-minute drive that don't know who Jesus is. They don't even know they need to know who Jesus is. That's why we're putting a Jesus outpost in Kingsburg. They don't need another church, but they need another church. They do need a church like ours. So the question is, and here's the question you care about, and I'm talking too long. Again, 2 weeks in a row, sorry. What does this mean? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for us? This isn't just my story, and it's not just Kingsburg's story. I have, on your behalf, thrown you into the middle of a story. And so I think we all have a role to play. And so what we're going to do is, we've actually already done this. We've taken every name that's in our database, and we're just pulling the names out, and we'll say, okay, you're going to Kingsburg, and you're going to Vice. No, First service didn't believe me either. I don't know why that's, yeah. No, we're not doing that at all. But there are a couple of things you can do with us. Number one, you can pray. Just pray. Pray for the Kingsburg campus as it's being shaped. If I had to give you a timeline, which I don't even really want to say what I'm about to say because there's almost a 100% chance it won't happen this way. But here's what I hope. I hope by December we have services in Kingsburg. That's what I hope, by December. It takes a while to launch a campus and kind of get everybody ready and us ready. So pray for the Kingsburg campus as it's being shaped. Pray for the people in the area who don't know Jesus yet, who are searching for something more, who've given up on church, who were hurt by church and thought never again. Pray that this new space becomes a place where those people can find belonging and healing and hope. So number one, we can all pray. And number two, join the interest list. Now, this is not pressure. There's no commitment. This is just your way of saying, I know Forrest is only going to talk about this maybe once a month at best, but I'd like to know a little bit more in real time what's going on. So sign me up for the email list. So you can, scan the QR code, or we have a For Kingsburg table out on the patio. Jordan will be out there. You can sign up out there, ask Jordan questions, whatever. Also, we're giving everyone a Svenhart Swedish Danish today. But if you're here and you're like, hey, I want to stay in the loop, or I live nearby, or I don't really care about this, but I know somebody in the area that might care about this. Maybe this is just stirring something in your heart, and you don't totally know what that means yet, but you're interested. Wherever you are, I just want to encourage you, sign up for the interest list. So pray, sign up for the interest list, and then let's step into this together. Let's just see where this leads. And I'm going to be honest with you, it will stretch us. But I also believe it's going to change lives. And I don't want to be the kind of church that chooses comfort over courage. I want to be the kind of church that says, I'm going to go where Jesus is going. I want to say yes to whatever Jesus is doing. And I'm going to work really hard and lose sleep at night to do whatever I can to make room at a table if someone doesn't have a seat. That's just being a Jesus church. And yes, I've just invited you all into that right now. And so the best thing I think we could do to close this morning is just pray together. And this, like last week, if you were here, is one of those prayers. I tried to word it really carefully, so I actually wrote it down, And I'm going to put it on the screens, and you can look at it, and Jesus will hear our prayer with your eyes open. And just pray along with me, not out loud, just in your heart, in your head, whatever, as I kind of pray this over us, and then we'll get out of here. Jesus, thank you for trusting us with this moment. Thank you for stirring hearts, opening doors, and inviting us into something bigger than ourselves. We don't take it lightly. We know this isn't about comfort or control. It's about obedience. It's about people. It's about your kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. So God, give us courage to say yes, eyes to see what you're doing, hands ready to serve, and hearts that beat for the people you love. Help us be a light in every neighborhood you lead us to, and may Kingsburg be the next chapter in a story that only you could write. We love you, we trust you, we follow you. And Jesus, it's in your name we pray. Amen. Hey guys, check out the For Kingsburg table. And if you're like, Forrest, all this is fantastic, but my life I'm going through it. I just need somebody to pray with me. Our prayer team will be down to my left. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Take it easy.